In this video, we're going to do a couple more examples of factoring by grouping. We've been given a couple of polynomials and we want to use grouping to factor each one of them. So this first one is AC plus 2AD plus 2BC plus 4BD, and we can use grouping to factor this polynomial. So we just need to divide our polynomial into two different groups and then pull a common factor out of each of those groups. So for example, we could group together the first two terms and the last two terms because we could factor an A out of these first two terms. Since we have AC and 2AD, there's A in both of those, so we could group those together and factor out an A. And then we could group the second two terms together and factor out a B because we have 2BC and 4BD. We have a B involved in both of them. Alternatively, we could group together the first and the third term and the second and the fourth term because the first and the third term both have a C involved, AC and 2BC. There's a C in both of them. And the second and the fourth term both have a D involved. There's 2AD and 4BD, so we could group those together and factor out a D. So there's multiple ways to go about doing this, and both ways are always going to work. So let's go ahead and try one of them. How about we group together the first and the third term? So we'll say AC plus 2BC, and then we'll group together the second and the fourth term. So 2AD plus 4BD, like this. And we've just separated everything with parentheses. So we have the first group, AC plus 2BC. We have a C in common, so we can pull the C out in front. So C times the quantity, A plus 2B, when we pull a C out of both terms. Now in our second group here, the only variable we have in common is the D, right? We have 2AD plus 4BD, so we have a D in common. But we also have a 2 in common, right? We have a coefficient of 2 here and a coefficient of 4 here. So we can factor out a 2 and we can factor out a D. So we'll go ahead and say plus 2D. And when we pull out the 2 and we pull out the D from this first term, all we're left with is A. So we get A there. When we pull out a 2, 2 times 2 is 4, so we're just left with a 2 for the second term. We have B left over, but we pulled out the D, so we're going to remove the D. So we just have A plus 2B. Now what we need to realize is that we have this common factor of A plus 2B in both terms. What that means is that we can pull out an A plus 2B from both of these terms. And when we do that, what are we left with in this term here? Well, we removed the A plus 2B, so we're just left with the C. Then from this term, we pulled out an A plus 2B, so what are we left with? Just a 2D. So we say C plus 2D, and now we've fully factored this polynomial, and the answer is quantity A plus 2B times quantity C plus 2D. Let's go ahead and look at a second example here. We have NS plus 3NX plus 2CS plus 6CX. In this case, we basically got four variables. We have N, S, C, and X. So we could group together the terms that have N, which would be these first two, and then we would have to group together the second two, which both have a C involved. Or we could group together the first and the third terms, which have an S in common, and the second and the fourth terms, which have an X in common. The thing is, you just can't include the same term in both groups. So if we're going to group together the first and the second terms, that means we have to group together the third and the fourth terms. And if we're going to group together the first and the third terms, that means we have to group together the remaining terms, the second and the fourth one. So in this case, let's just go ahead and group together the first two terms and the last two terms like this. In these first two terms, we only have an N that's common, so we pull out that common factor of N, and that's going to leave us with S plus 3X. In the second two terms here, we have a C in common, so we can pull that out, but we also have a 2 in common because 2 goes into 2 once and 2 goes into 6 3 times. So we're going to go ahead and pull out a 2C, and we'll get plus 2C times the quantity. Removing a 2C from 2CS just leaves us with S. Removing a 2 from the 6 just leaves us with 3. 2 times 3 gives us 6, so we just end up with 3. We pulled out the C, but we have to leave the X there. Now notice that we have a common factor of S plus 3X in both terms, so we can factor out an S plus 3X. And when we do that, what are we left with when we factor an S plus 3X out of this term? Well, we got rid of the S plus 3X, leaving us with just an N. And when we factor out an S plus 3X from this term, we get rid of that. We're just left with 2C. So the result is N plus 2C, and our final answer then is quantity S plus 3X times quantity N plus 2C. And if you're ever unsure about your final answer, or if you just want to double check yourself, you can always FOIL this back out to make sure that you get back to your original polynomial.